Ever wonder how a breakthrough idea actually becomes reality? Hi, I'm Susan Lindner, and this is the Innovation Storytellers Show, where I sit down with the change makers behind the world's most inspiring innovations to learn how they did it and the stories that help them make it happen. If you've ever had a big idea or want to tell yours in a more powerfully connected way, you're in the right place. I promise you'll get new ideas for how to tell a better story to your audiences too. So let's dive in. Welcome back. I'm Susan Lindner, your host of Innovation Storytellers. Today, we're going to take a very interesting walk. I think there are some Fortune 500 companies that come to my show and they might be part of your everyday life, places like Procter & Gamble or Google or Tesla or whomever. But there are other organizations that live in your life that you may or may not know about. They may live on the periphery of your life. And so my guest today is doing innovation in an organization that has such an impact on all of us, but you may not know. And so I want to share with you my guest today, Portia Lane Child, who is a visionary leader and innovator who drives growth and transformation in the $8 billion electronic systems sector of BAE Systems. With 18 years of experience spanning various leadership roles, she has spearheaded numerous initiatives that have yielded significant results, including the establishment of a new company accelerator that fosters ideation and incubation and transition of cutting-edge technologies. Her expertise has been instrumental in shaping the company's product portfolio, and her passion for innovation has inspired teams to collaborate and thrive. Portia holds degrees in electrical and mechanical engineering from Wentworth Institute of Technology, systems engineering from Worcester Polytechnic Institute, and an MBA from the prestigious Sloan School of Business at MIT. Now, outside of her professional pursuits, we should know that she is living in beautiful Hollis, New Hampshire with her husband and son, and she is committed to empowering the next generation of leaders and innovators. Portia, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's exciting to be here today.
So, as I mentioned in my intro, tell us a little bit about BAE. If you don't know BAE, you're not going to find them in the grocery store,
Sure.
but they are impacting your life, whether you know it or not. Tell us a little bit about BAE Systems for my listeners.
Sure. So BAE Systems is a aerospace and defense focused company. I'm in the US subsidiary in the electronic systems sector. It's about 16,000 employees today, mostly in the United States and some in other parts of the world. There's two other US sectors, and then we're actually owned by a parent company in the UK called BAE Systems PLC, which is probably more what maybe your listeners in the US would equate to a Lockheed Martin.
Got you. Right.
Yeah.
So we're talking about big works in defense and contracting and operating at the highest levels of government with the systems that you're working on and the innovations that you're working on as well.
Yes. And so our sector is focused on electronics for defense and aerospace. We do a lot of different things. We actually play in about 12 defense markets and 2 commercial markets. We're considered world leaders in electronic warfare. And you can think about the electronics that are providing communications, data links, radios. We also have one of the premier military GPS businesses in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which you may or may not know was the birthplace of GPS.
I did not know that. And I've been to
Yeah.
Cedar Rapids. And so shout out to Cedar Rapids.
Right? It's lovely. We also have some great commercial avionics capabilities and also power propulsion systems.
So when it comes to innovation, these systems are big and behemoth, right? They take a lot of effort to make shifts and changes. But first, before we dive into that, tell us a little bit how you walked in to the innovation front door. How did you walk into the innovation house?
Sure. So, I mean, I'm here certainly because of my decision to enter into a STEM field. And as you can see, I have a little bit of a problem of collecting those engineering degrees.
Well done. You've collected all the best ones.
So it's really driven by just this fascination that I think I've had forever in terms of that space between an idea and implementation. coupled with this curiosity on how things work and why they matter. And I think that's really, been the themes of my career, driving innovation, seeking out hard problems and asking, what if and why not types of questions. So looking at, almost 2 decades in aerospace and defense and with BA Systems, the reason why I chose this industry and the reason why I've stayed is this unique intersection between emerging technology and really meaningful problem solving. And this research and development engine. I mean, it hasn't only shaped modern warfighting, but it's really shaped our modern world. Just the internet, mobile phones, right? Not to mention the foundation for AI and space exploration. So it's been an exciting place and it continues to be an exciting place. And I think my passion in this innovation space has really come from I really like to be helpful. And I've had this opportunity to work with so many teams in this dynamic work environment. So being able to observe, learn, and understand what it takes to push boundaries and move ideas through the business, it's really inspirational to me to help other people learn how to do the same thing.
Yeah. And I mean, these are big organizations that you're innovating, right? Your portfolio internally is is large, but it's impacting a huge number of us on the outside too, right?
Mhm.
Is part of the joy of innovation for you is impact?
Yeah, I think it would be very difficult for me to work in a different field that didn't have this kind of mission, right?
Mm,
So how, again, it's like, how does something matter? And so wanting to work on something that's really making an impact is certainly something that brings me to work every day.
yeah. And for so many of us, but also communicating across so many different people, silos, and you're in a super technical field. I mean, I love having some of my guests here, multiple PhDs, lots of physicists and chemists, and we just did a show on quantum computing. And to be honest, I was white knuckling through that conversation, just trying to hold on to my 10th grade physics capabilities. But can you tell us a little bit about what innovation looks like at BAE? Like what is that? Tell us a little bit about your portfolio and what innovation feels like at BAE.
So we have a really, I think, special part of our organization. So we have a business unit that's really focused on pursuing research and development that feeds our core markets. And so we have this model that we're really focused on that technology transition. And so I had this opportunity to run our innovation program, which is even outside of that. So, the thought of how are ideas successful, right, was really what was brewing in my mind in terms of what I wanted to bring to our innovation programming. And so when I thought about this, there's really three things that emerged for me. One was really people need to understand the business, right? Why does the business exist and how does it work? Two was bridging that gap between the idea and the bigger picture, right? I think this is just an essential element to both, and something difficult, right? That scientists struggle with too, right? Sometimes it's just this little breakthrough that might have a decade-long tail. And so you have to really imagine, what is it that's going to make it matter? How is it going to be used in product and touched by your customer? So bridging that gap for both, eliminating the need for imagination, but also developing that really important business case. And yeah, and last, of course, close to your heart is just that quality of communication. So making sure the message clear, crisp, and tailored to the right audience.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. Can you give us an example of an innovation that you were working on that you were really hoping that others would connect with and want to pursue inside the organization? What comes to mind when you think about some of the innovations that you've worked on and how you've talked about them?
So I think, maybe it's good to mention, my personality. I'm very passionate about the pursuit of yes. So with good intentions and knowing there's a good idea, I really am focused on wanting to get there. And so I think it's a personality trait to just start to navigate the obstacles and the friction and the messages that you need to take. So I think that's an
Hmm.
important characteristic of being successful with your innovation idea, no matter what it is. But one of the one of the more interesting experiences that I actually developed this strategic links model from that experience was I had worked in a part of our business that was really focused on receiving RF signals. And then I worked in another part of our business that was very focused on transmitting RF signals. And
So
so
radio frequency.
radio frequency, yes.
Yeah.
And so I recognized a breakthrough in the receiving business coupled with a breakthrough in the transmitting business. If those two things came together, we could have this really differentiating capability.
Mm.
And when I went to go propose this internal research and development program, there was this big kerfluffle because we didn't have the financial systems or the business processes in place to do this cross business investment. And that was just really eye opening, I think, in terms of really understanding the environment that you're trying to innovate in. And I think very informative to, how I designed the curriculum for the Innovation Impact Accelerator, which really fed from, right, just kind of understanding how do you know that it's worth pursuing, right, through the friction, right, through the obstacles. And it's just, do you have, the right customer mission, right? We talk a lot about mission here, but that's really the problem to solve. Do you have strategic business alignment? Our innovation program is open to all of the employees. And sometimes we get these really amazing ideas, but if they don't belong in our business, they're just not something that's going to move forward successfully. So are you aligned with core competencies, core markets, a near adjacency, or is it a two-box move with enough potential that you can communicate that you have stakeholders willing to come along with you? And the other important part is the differentiation, and can you, be competitive and, secure that market?
So can we talk about this employee innovation for a moment?
Yeah.
Yeah. So many of our guests are looking for ways to get employees more involved in the innovation process. And I'm curious how you do it at BAE and how you also distinguish. I mean, obviously, some ideas are going to be executable and others are not. But thinking about that, how you mobilize and communicate to a huge workforce that their ideas matter and you want to bring them to the fore.
Yeah, so that was also a big focus of mine. We had this longstanding innovation program, but it was still really only reaching maybe 10% of the
Mm.
employee population. So how do you get the word out that you have this innovation tool and that all are really welcome? So there was a lot of groundwork. We use a platform called Hype, which is a tool that really allows us to access our employee community and have this really interactive space where people can weigh in on different people's ideas and kind of upvote them in certain ways. So really trying to make that interactive and a lot of personal employee ownership. And
And
oh, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, so does this come off like like an employee contest almost, where you're soliciting ideas? Does it happen once a year? Does it happen? Is it an ongoing kind of fluid process?
So it was an ongoing process.
Yeah.
When I integrated this accelerator, I did bring in competition, right? So
Mm.
competition and attention. So we ended up with 20 finalists. They went through a competitive pitch competition, and then we got down to the first cohort of 10 teams, and they were celebrated, throughout the organization, throughout the process. And so I think bringing attention to innovators, our scientists, engineers, and others that were in that space is just another way to say, hey, you can do this too. And the results, I think, spoke for themselves. Historically, our innovation teams have about a 30% success rate of getting follow-on funding in one of the core business units. This cohort saw 70% having transitioned to follow-on funding and a lot of intellectual property disclosures. So it was really successful, and trying to bring more attention to, those our best thinkers.
Yeah. And is there a reward system in place as well?
Yeah, so they get funding for their ideas.
Yeah.
And I think that's a unique part is the innovation program we have really is unburdened, I would say, right? Right. Some of the other business units, right, they have these objectives and these core focus. We really have a lot more freedom in what we want to do with that funding. So that allows us to do maybe more of the funkier things or very early TRL activities.
Yeah. So you've set up this phenomenal accelerator, right, inside the organization. And this is a question for every innovation team out there is, do we go the corporate venture capital route and we'll invest in startups? Do we incubate our own startups? Do we find startups out there and become venture clients? Do we acquire startups and bring them into the fold? How do we source new ideas constantly to feed the machine, right? That is the demands of the market, demands of our team, demands to just stay competitive. Tell us a little bit about the accelerator and how you initiated that and what it's doing today.
So it is internally focused. It was modeled after best practices of accelerators like YC. I'd been at MIT Sandbox, Delta V. So it was modeled after that, but just with the internal team focus. And one of the things that I would say to the cohort is, you have so much more resources than other startups, right?
Oof.
I'm giving you a little bit of money, but you also have access to millions of dollars of labs and customer access and other peers, right, to help you. So really you have all the ingredients to be successful. So I think pushing them through that kind of boot camp was important to really understand, how much we can do inside. I have a great partnership with our tech scouting team, and so we have been doing more to help the tech scouting team get their word out with their engagement with startups. I don't think, the defense industry is somewhat new in terms of dealing with these non-traditional and dual use focus and these commercial models. And I think it's positive, right? Overall, these new entrants are right with lower hurdle rates due to the speed of technology is going to continue to drive that pressure that agility and prioritization for innovation really need. But I think there's more strength in this particular industry, I think, through partnership and helping to give more of those defense focused dual use startups access, right, to our platforms or to our customers and to our systems to help accelerate their tech more so than maybe, just buying them. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we'll see a lot more low and mid-tier non-traditionals continuing to grow.
What was the criteria for the accelerator? How do you get into the accelerator at BAE?
So we use the tool. So we let people put their ideas into the system, and those ideas had to resonate against a grading rubric. One of the key elements was that it needed to align with what the business was redefining through our tech roadmaps as key capability areas that we needed and that kind of transcended multiple markets. So core technology elements that could go in many places. So we did ask them to kind of, again, align a little bit with what the business needed, right? We're electronics focused, what might be needed in the next 10 to 20 years, thinking about it that way. So there was some informed innovation, I think, elements there for the ideation process. Then they submitted their ideas. Then I brought in a lot of voices, a lot of technical SMEs and others, and had them come in and actually grade them. Because I thought it was important that, again, right, in terms of how do you reach all of this business, that people felt that their voices were heard in these innovation decisions. And then we picked the winning teams, and then it was a wild month to get them ready for the pitch contest. and then we had this great pitch contest. We had amazing leadership presence, and I think it just really showed that the business values innovators and innovation.
Yeah, fantastic. I prep many startups for their pitch nights, as well as working with the innovation team at the Air Force. And their task is to pitch to the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the head of the Air Force when our pitching is done. So I'm crossing my fingers, just hoping that everything goes well with those pitches. I feel like it's such a Caesar
Yes.
thumbs down moment for those airmen and women who are pitching.
Amazing.
The highest ranks of the Air Force. It's a scary moment, right? It's
Yeah.
different than like a sweaty startup pitch night at your local university. Certainly, the stakes are quite high. But it's fascinating because so many organizations have attempted, the accelerator model and are trying to find the way still of making that effort and that movement show real value to business unit leaders inside. So do you have like an internal evangelist who, or someone who's coming forward with a challenge that needs to be solved? Oftentimes we hear on this show that
Mhm.
it's a persistent, pervasive challenge that can't seem to be met by the internal mechanisms that currently exist to solve it. Was the accelerator set up in order to solve the challenges of individual business units?
So we do other campaigns. So the accelerator was really, again, focused on trying to identify those kind of key capability advantages to evolve the next generation of products. We do targeted campaigns with business units on their needs. And actually, we started to do some other campaigns where we were crowdsourcing solutions. So actually, I had the GPS business host a problem they had in terms of some specific needs and some algorithms they were looking to solve, and it worked. So we had people weigh in on, their experience in terms of other ground systems or in our R&D business to share what they had for other out. And so we were able to solve this problem in one business unit with experience in others. So that's was very cool ways to bring the business together, doing these
Yeah.
kind of tech campaigns and in the outreach that we have to our engineering community.
Because sometimes, right, when I love this idea of like sourcing what's the next generation of what we're going to do. But sometimes, like, then you source this amazing thing, it's hard to find someone to own it, right, within the business units. Or do you have that pathway right from jump where you're thinking about if we can evolve or iterate, to this next innovation, who's going to take up the mantle to actually execute on it?
Mhm.
Was that part of the plan?
That was part of the curriculum in
Mm,
the accelerator, right? It was they needed to grow their internal network. They needed to understand what core business cares about what you're doing and what
mm-hmm,
core business could care about what you're doing. And so they had homework. They had to go extend their network. I used my network with the business for them, right? Helping them make introductions and starting to build their own relationships so they could grow that traction. And then at the end of the accelerator, they pitched their progress and, essentially was asking for investment, right, from the core businesses. And so that was part of the teaching, right? It wasn't handed. They had
yeah.
to go out and create those because that's really, I think, where the learning is in the business is seeing how welcoming people are in, just doing that simple outreach. Like they were able to get audiences with technical leaders they didn't think that they would be able to, and just be, seeing that they can network and they can communicate and people care.
So let's talk about the storytelling now. Was it a hard sell to get the accelerator moving inside of BAE initially?
I wouldn't say it was easy. I will say I was blessed with some autonomy and
Mhm.
freedom. I did have to pitch I did have to pitch this to the leadership team to make sure there was buy-in. I'd say, there was influences in terms of the timing when I wanted to release the competition and, the resource commitments that I needed to be able to do the program, certainly. But the idea, I think, was pretty well supported. And of course, I'd shaped some champions to help get my message through in terms of why this is important and how it's allows us to show that we care about innovation and we care about our innovators, and what the vision was is that this accelerator is going to create a flywheel of people that now know how to move ideas through the business much better than they did before.
Yeah. So is that the story that you told? Tell us about the flywheel, Portia. Is that how the conversation went?
Yeah, actually, I my theme was so my dad's a lobsterman in Portland, Maine, and so after a conversation with the president, I walked away with this concept of how do you teach people how to fish?
Mm.
And so I just went on this theme of being a lobsterman's daughter, and that's really what I was setting out to do with this accelerator programming.
Wait, can you share a little bit about that? I'm sure my listeners would love to know because I think, and this is for everybody listening, right? Is that when you bring a piece of yourself into the boardroom, into these compelling conversations where people can see something larger than the idea that's sitting on the table, when we are connected at a much more humane and fundamental level, you get buy-in faster. I can't tell you how many people want to leave
Mhm.
emotion at the door as if we're robots, or as the new term I'm hearing in the literature, cobots. I was at it. I was at a room full of HR professionals who said, we are now commanding human and artificial employees every day. Fascinating.
Wow.
Cobots now.
Mhm.
That's how we'll work together. But can you tell us the story about you as a lobsterman's daughter?
Sure. Yes, I'm a lobsterman's daughter from Portland, Maine. I think it certainly shaped a lot of who I am. I mean, I can go into this. So,
No, I
I
mean in
started
the
working on the
context
lobster.
of this accelerator, that like how you teach someone to fish.
Yeah,
How did you bring that together?
yeah. So, I mean, I started working on the lobster boat when I was 12, and I think the messages and lessons that I got there are really drive a lot of the way that I think and I really think you can do anything with the hard work. And I think that comes forward. And so so yeah, I put a picture up of my dad lobstering. It was his 50th anniversary down
Wow.
in Fisherman's Wharf. Yeah, so I just hired a photographer to take some photos, and so I had this beautiful photo of him fishing, and it just something that I shared, and my personal story of there are skills that you learn to get jobs done, and innovation isn't different.
Yeah, fantastic. So don't hesitate, people, to bring your whole self into the boardroom when you're having a compelling conversation, especially one that requires influence and behavior change, because all of us have gone through stages of behavior change, of learning and growth along the way. And so we have the
Yeah.
opportunity to bring those stories to light. And I often share with folks, there are a couple of frameworks, to consider when you're trying to tell a compelling story that moves people's behavior forward. And the first one is creating a shared history in the room. So asking yourself, like, where do we have mutually shared experiences that we can instantly relate to, whether it's an industry, whether it's our personal lives, et cetera. Like, how can we bring those pieces together? Any place where we can have a shared history, where we can conjure a memory, that's a way
Mhm.
to begin a story that makes people connect with you really effortlessly.
Yeah, that quality of communication has a relationship element, certainly.
For sure. And the next thing is, in presenting an idea, something like an accelerator like Portia has, is to ask the question, what is the shift that's happening in the world that requires that we do this now? We have to be able to answer the question, why this, why now? And I'm curious, Portia, if you had to make a compelling case for the why this, why now?
I think I was really focused on bringing modern innovation thinking into my business.
Mm,
And I think that part of that is, as I mentioned, right, more and more non-traditionals, right? More and more new entrants. So the speed of technology, right, that lowered hurdle rate also brings really intensifying competition. And so, right, in tech, really the only way to stay ahead is to make sure that you have this pipeline of innovation. And so I think starting to think more like non-traditionals, starting to bring in tools that help us go faster, think bigger, and improve our storytelling were all really important elements of something that we needed to do now. And I think those skills transcend not only the internal maturation of ideas, but also how we talk to the customer. Some of my failures are when I reflected on it was that I didn't talk to enough customers. And then I've
mm.
seen a really compelling leaders be able to hubs or loss of kind of traction because of this conviction gained from really relentless customer engagement. And so I think the more you talk to customers, explore potential customers, is just an essential element of innovation and an important outside voice. If you can bring in your customer's voice at any point in time, it's such a powerful just advocate for your idea and confidence that this is something that's going to matter.
Yeah, and oftentimes we get the best ideas from there, right? They don't necessarily have to start with us in the lab or with one another spitballing ideas. If we just went to the customer and said, I'm a New Yorker. I asked the question, where's my customer bleeding from the neck? Like I'm trying to find the greatest pain point possible. And then sometimes you find smaller pain points that gets resolved really quickly that wind up alleviating a bigger challenge that you didn't know existed. And so I'm also curious what you think, what some of the challenges are kind of weighing down innovators today. What do you think is challenging for a lot of innovators, given the climate that we're in, whether that's, the economy, the whether it's inflation, whether it's, government issues, I'm fascinated by this question because one of my guests previously was the head of NATO's Innovation Fund. And we had a fantastic conversation talking about, dual use and what's coming next. There are so many challenges, but huge opportunities on the horizon. And I don't go to an innovation conference today without a panel on dual use, as one, as one issue. That might not be, what comes to mind for you, but I'm curious what you think weighs on the minds of most innovators today and challenges they're facing.
So, I mean, I'm fascinated by the dual use space, and I think it's really exciting to see,
Totally.
more and more interest in it in the, in the VC community and others. I think it'll all really matter in an important way. For challenges for innovators, I still think that if you're, in a corporate innovation environment, one of the bigger challenges is just productive failure management. I think that, we need better processes and, maybe thought architectures around how we look at failure. And I think it's really difficult, right, for business leaders to look at something that isn't going the way that it was said it was going to happen, or when there was learning inside of that, and not just want to kind of cut the resource there. And so I think really trying to figure out, well, letting failure maybe finish, right? So what was the real learning there? What can we build from it? What did the talent learn from it? And I think more tolerance there will really allow, I think, innovation programming and to really kind of take off when you can kind of figure out how to make more space for that. I think the
culture,
other
Portia, sorry,
piece,
is that a culture issue where like as a culture, we have to get better at being amenable to failure, to de-risk, and as innovators, maybe we have to do a better job of de-risking failure?
yeah, I think there's a cultural element. And to me, though, I think it also comes down to incentives, right? We have so many things tied to these short-term financial incentives that it's really difficult to wade through, sometimes the timelines that I think really processing failure or letting something get to a point of failure or not takes.
Yeah. I often hear that example of like, Edison failed 10,000 times before he invented the light bulb. And I'm just like, what CEO was signing off on 10,000 failures? Like, I would like to meet that board with their unlimited Westinghouse, right? With their unlimited dollars and their unlimited time frames to let Edison just keep going 10,000 times. I want to meet the corporation that's going to manage that.
Think about this. Think about the story he was telling.
Right.
Right. And he was living off this reputation of being an inventor. So he had, there was evidence there that maybe we could let him keep going. And thank goodness they did.
Right. Exactly. We'd all be sitting here with candles otherwise. Well, I ask every person who comes on the show these three important questions, and I'm hoping I can ask them of you as well. Please. So, Portia, what do you think is the greatest innovation of all time?
All right. So I did know this was coming, and I still thought it was very difficult to pick one. So I'm going to take you through my thought process.
Okay, cool.
So so I think if I go to a natural history museum, I always want to see their examples of the first, early tools. I think that is just such a moment of human ingenuity that we've built so much from. And then I started thinking about self-expression and art. I don't know if that's innovation or just innate, but I think it's so, so important. But since you just mentioned the light bulb, ultimately I circled around the invention of electricity. I think it's just powered so many of our industrial revolutions. And now this AI revolution is so dependent on it. And so I think there's a lot of innovation to come in this power management space. And it's just, you know, I don't know. I think so. I think I'm going to go with electricity.
I love it. The anthropologist in me loves where your thinking began. And now with the advent of data centers, right? I mean, and the as we see, quantum and AI is going to require a quantity of electricity that we have never
Yeah.
considered before. It's going to be the new water, I think, for
Yeah.
us, for sure.
Well, hopefully there's, yeah. Well, water's another part of that whole infrastructure.
That's right.
Definitely
We got to
following.
keep those things cool.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, and yeah, it's a really interesting problem. So I just think there's going to be a lot of innovation in that space.
It's funny. I had a guest on from Norway who runs data centers throughout Norway, and his answer is come to Norway. It's cold here already. We have these
Yeah,
fantastic fjords with lots of water that naturally just tumbles down over your data center. So
that's great.
we could just use gravity, water, and
Mhm.
the cold iciness of the Nordics to take care of all your data center needs. I thought it was a fantastic pitch. So what if you had the opportunity to join any innovation team in the course of human history? Which team would you have joined?
There are two characters from my childhood that I credit a lot with my decisions. One is Mr. Rogers, in a
Okay.
particular episode where he goes to the crayon factory. So this adventure is it's both beautiful cinematography, but I was really fascinated by the assembly line and the process of getting the crayons in the box. And actually, for weeks afterwards, I built assembly lines all over the
What?
house. Yeah,
No.
for doing different
What were you
things.
building, Portia? What was your assembly line made of?
Oh, just like paper and dominoes, stuff like that. But it was still
Uh-huh.
just trying to do things, and it just I was really and drawing ones. It was just a definitely a key element of maybe that's when I knew I had the knack.
The
And
engineering
then
bug? Yeah.
yeah, and then the other one is Amelia Earhart.
Mm.
So anytime I was able to do a project on a person, I would pick her. She was just a pioneering woman, very brave, and I think she just was always setting these really lofty goals. So I probably have to pick being on her team and helping her achieve everything she wanted to accomplish and maybe helping her come back.
Yeah, wow. Talk about a last mile support that
Mhm.
could have been needed there. Yeah. What a role model, for sure. Just fearless. I love that. And what do you think is the innovation that the world needs now?
So in maybe not the world, but 100-mile radius for me, I'm ready to get off the road, Susan. I think that would be better for everyone having a robotic chauffeur. But thinking about the world, one thing that's been fascinating me for a while is our incentive systems, right? You really can't innovate without having the incentive systems supporting that and pulling it along. And so I think there's been some interesting movement in this, in the incentive spaces. If you think about the environmental social governance efforts that had happened more recently in the news, moving to maybe, the idea of going for a semi-annual reporting versus a quarterly, right? That's a small movement, but sometimes these short-term incentives, I think, could take away from ultimately longer term value. And so even if you were able to have just a couple more months of undisrupted funding rate, based on the financial goals, I think even that could make a difference at that small effort. And then, following this Tesla incentive package for Elon Musk and the decision there, to be honest, we'll see what happens. It's a tremendous amount of money, but I do like the horizon that he's given, right? Again, it's much more longer term than some of the traditional CEO packages. So
Right, can you
this,
refresh
again, I
our
think this,
memory for those of us who aren't following Elon's compensation package directly? How?
they're voting on $1 trillion compensation package. And he
Wow.
has to achieve all these goals, but it's in 10 years.
Mm.
But so it's I like the horizon, right? So he's got these really lofty goals of transforming our lives with some of his ideas of robots and other things. And so just giving him a horizon like that, I don't know about the amount of money, but the horizon, right? That's an innovation and incentives that I think could matter.
Wow. Yeah. Time, right?
Time. And collaboration. I
And
think,
collaboration.
yeah.
Yeah. A consideration of how, as humans, we get stuff done, right? And are we willing to, and it's interesting because I think all of the big thinkers are those who saw themselves in huge swaths of time. They didn't see their lives as kind of necessarily driving toward an immediate endpoint or an immediate goal in the today. And that's how you get big things done. Nothing great happens by quarter, right?
Right.
It's lots of small chunks along the way with a bigger goal in mind. How we started this conversation, it's about passion. And so passion isn't necessarily contained by quarterly mapping. It's something much bigger and broader than that.
Yeah, maybe I'll start reminding people of the light bulb story too.
Yeah, especially when you're asking for budget.
Yes. And I think time is so interesting too in this age of AI, right? So, I really encourage everyone everywhere to get familiar with as many AI tools as possible. Productivity tools, how it can augment your thinking. I just think it's really foundational, and I really encourage any engineers that have graduated in 2024 or before can they go back for formal education and grow that foundation, because I think that's going to be very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Portia, if people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably LinkedIn, if that makes sense. If you wanted to put my LinkedIn on the podcast,
Absolutely.
that would be the way to go.
Portia Lane Child, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I know my listeners are really going to be enriched by what you've shared.
Oh, thank you, Susan. It's great to be here.
I truly hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you did, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss the next story that could inspire your own. And if you want to learn more about me or how I can help you and your team to become master storytellers to get your big idea to its finish line, head over to innovationstorytellers.com and schedule a call with me.